son of the Soul King himself, Yhwach, who has awakened after 999 years to take over Soul Society. Let's begin with who this geezer actually is. The 1,000-year blood war battle begins when Yhwach awakens from his 900 years of sleep. He identifies himself as the first Quincy, as well as the father of all Quincy's in the world. This means that Yhwach blood flows through every Quincy, including mixed-blooded ones like Ichigo. Yes, if you guys don't know Ichigo's a Quincy, then watch our playlist and know that Ichigo is indeed a Quincy. But his relationship with Ichigo runs deeper than that. As if it wasn't a big flex, Yhwach is also the son of the Soul King, the ruler of Soul Society, and the one who maintains the balance in the world. In fact, the Soul King is what mostly closely resembles a kami per se, being the deity in the Bleach universe, making Yhwach the son of God. Moreover, it seems that Kubo had sneaked in a foreshadow of Yhwach's appearance way earlier in the series, years before he would actually appear. Yep, back in the Lost Agents arc, Yhwach's presence was hinted at. We see Ichigo with all the major battles with his adversaries, where he passes right through them. From his initial battle with Ishida, Renji, Kenpachi, it goes on all the way to Aizen. And then we see this mysterious figure, who is none other than Yhwach. But like all of Ichigo's ops, they have a beginning. And that's where we'll start. We don't know how Yhwach was conceived, but I'm betting it was some spiritual wuju manifestation. Or the other likelihood is, the Soul King had himself a queen. Regardless, what's insane is that Yhwach had some OP powers right from birth. That's right. Even though, looking into Yhwach's history, we learned that he was a baby without the ability to see, hear, speak, or even move. He couldn't even cry. Now, whilst he lacked everything else, he knew he would survive and live on. Against such odds, Yhwach had an incredible power, which was the ability to share fragments of his soul with others. Everyone who touched him eventually got something they didn't have before. Apart from gaining powers, the pieces of Yhwach's soul in them healed wounds that their own souls couldn't. However, there's always the catch when you gain some mysterious powers from a baby. Well, of course there was. Since fragments of Yhwach's soul lived through its holder's journey, each person's different aspects were imprinted on these pieces, which meant any powers they obtained along with their unique skill sets was pretty much kind of like downloaded on these soul fragments. And as we all know, nothing is really permanent, because these fragments went back to Yhwach when their owners died with all the imprints. Regaining his soul fragments meant that Yhwach gained every single abilities that was cultivated by those individuals, along with also gaining the natural ability of senses and functioning that Yhwach had originally lacked as a child. In fact, these individuals who touched him never really lived too long, but that didn't deter people from flocking around him and outright worshipping him. So when Yhwach finally gained the ability to hear, he realized that he was being called by the unusual name Yhwach. He understood that this resembled the name of the people's god and took it on. It's no surprise that Kubo used solid real-life references to refine Yhwach's character, like his name is literally the direct inspiration from the Hebrew god's name, as the symbols can be translated as Yahweh or Jehovah. Yhwach's name also has a deeper connection to his powers, as the YH is taken from the name of God, and the German word Yhwach means awake. Thus, his name can be viewed, more poetically, the God who is awake. That's not even where the references end, because Yhwach is also like a parallel to the Christian concept of God. Because, number 1, he is the father of all Quincy's. Number 2, he is the son of the Soul King, being the kami of the Bleach universe. Number 3, he is the Holy Spirit within each of his children who have a piece of his soul, giving them power. There's no doubt that Kubo portrayed Yhwach as a messiah for the Quincy's, as he proclaimed to desire peace and abhor violence. He hates conflicts and believes painful battles should end as quickly as possible, but sadly they are a necessary evil for his goals. However, he openly loathes Arancas and shows no mercy in killing or harming them despite having their loyalty. Arancas to him are seen as evil, much like devils, but this also tells us that he wanted all of his subordinates to oblige him in fear. We know this as even though Yhwach strongly condemns infighting and blind loyalty from his Sternritter followers, he chooses brutal means to end conflicts, like cutting off Luda's arms as a punishment for arguing with another Sternritter. In fact, he also has quite a cruel ability to call back the fragments of his souls in the Quincy children forcibly, which mind you is fatal to the person. Yhwach has to keep doing this because without absorbing souls, he will revert back to his early stages with no senses. Even though this process is necessary for Yhwach to heal and become stronger in his sleep every day, it's clear that he's all about the ends justifying the means. Whilst it seemingly saddens him to do so, Yhwach also undertook Al-Swalin, which is basically a large-scale forced callback of his soul pieces from Quincy's he deemed impure, including those with mixed blood. Remember, when he does this, the Quincy's die. Through this, Yhwach can also steal their powers and make them his own. However, not all pure-blooded are safe either, as Yhwach did this 9 years ago to regain his strength after reawakening, and many Quincy's, including Masaki, Ichigo's mother, died in the process. But the ones who survived were worthy of his Sternritter army, including Uryu Ishida. After his reawakening, Yhwach wasted no time ruling the One Yhwach, the organization of Quincy's with only one goal: war against the Soul Reapers. However, even before Yhwach gathered his current army, he had amassed one 900 years ago as well. In the 200 years after his birth, Yhwach created his kingdom called the Yhwach and then took over the northern lands, villages and forest, including the places where he found Yhwach, who later became his advisor, and Baz B. By this time, Yhwach also figured out a more effective way to distribute his soul by assigning shrift or letters to the Sternritters. This again goes back to the Christian theology, as in John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. These letters are practically words bestowed by Yhwach, who also sees himself as a god. He himself has the first letter, A, representation of Almighty, and each letter he assigned corresponded to a name that fits the person's powers. Lilibara was the first Quincy Yhwach bestowed a shrift upon. Through the engraving of a letter directly onto another's soul, he could share out his soul more deeply and with greater power. Needless to say, this power of soul distribution is very unique, and Quincy's with these abilities are near non-existent. In fact, Yhwach is the only Quincy other than Yhwach with the ability to impart his power onto another Quincy. He is the first in 200 years since Yhwach's birth, and thus he has the shrift B for balance. This is because both Yhwach and Yhwach are two sides of a balanced scale. Since Yhwach has to sleep every night to heal and live longer, this is the time he returns to being the father of the Quincy. During this time, Yhwach and Yhwach swaps powers as well as roles, where Yhwach takes up the mask of the ruler in his stead, being connected to Yhwach. The end goal of this soul distribution power is to make Yhwach himself stronger. When he calls back the pieces of his soul, effectively killing the host or his children, Yhwach receives the unique abilities the Quincy's had from their own birth. Once he does this, Yhwach can either keep the power or even redistribute it to the remaining Quincy's. Now, if you guys are confused on how all of this works, just think of it like this. Yhwach can basically give all of his children power, but not ability. Now, after this, upon their death, or when Yhwach decides to call the fragment of his soul back, the Quincy's leave their abilities to integrate, grow, and strengthen Yhwach's own arsenal of powers. And with such an OP power,